This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
There's 4 facts we talk about. One is the status quo is a deceptive little devil. The second one is you're actually wired to disrupt. The third one is the idea that relationships in life, which we all live in a sea of relationships, but relationships provide both headwinds and tailwinds. And then the fourth one is that you only go around once, so make it matter.
I think if you define the word leadership, you can't not sort of like take a step back, get the whiteboard out, and write up a few words. Like when you think about leadership, especially if you're listening to this podcast, well, of course you're going to start with the corporate room. You're going to be in a boardroom somewhere. You're thinking about leadership from a business standpoint. But then if you kind of go a layer beyond that, like where did all this start from? Oh shoot, I think the military has been doing this pretty well for a while here, and then if you're going to teach this stuff, there's the academy side, there's the academic side of leadership. And then, as a sports guy, I'm going to look at like great coaches and managers for leadership. This is a pretty darn good intersection to live at. My guest today, we met probably 5 years ago now. And you had 3 of those 4 boxes checked, by the way. I don't think you've got unless I know you're like, hey, I'm working with the Tennessee Titans, which maybe you are. Are you the general manager of the Titans now?
How did you know?
So 75%, if you're batting 750, and when I think of Patrick Leddin, I mean, you've got the corporate side, you live the military side, although I'm super curious to hear if you're still do you still spar in those arenas a little bit? And then you got the academic side. I mean, Vanderbilt is at least what I remember from you, although it sounds like you're tiptoeing, maybe a little away from that world.
Yeah, well, actually, I kind of took a bold step. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
All right, cool. So first of all, it's great to see you. And if I remember the last time we jammed, you gratefully invited me on your show, and we were like, oh, I need to have you on my show. And then it only took like 2 years to make it happen. So you've been busy. And I see there's 2 babies over your shoulder here. For those who can't see it, they're not humans, but you have birthed now 2 books. And I believe Disrupt Everything, which I'm head nodding on, is your latest, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It actually comes out. It doesn't come out officially until September. The book's called Disrupt Everything. So the publisher tried to do something disruptive around it, and they produced a whole bunch of books on the front end that aren't available in stores, but they're only available for events, which is kind of a fun idea.
Boy, this sounds like marketing. This sounds like disruption.
Yeah, pretty close to it, right?
How's it going? How's life?
It's going really well. It's going really well. It's nice when I hear you say, "Oh, you're batting 750." That's, like you said, that's not a bad batting average. But no, I don't have the pro sports thing going on, other than like super fan a couple things. But other than that, no.
Well, obviously, we're going to start there now. So, who are your squads? Who are your teams?
NFL, Bears, Cubs, NHL, Preds. Don't really follow NBA that much, to be honest with you. Follow college ball, and I'm a Kentucky fan.
Kentucky for college?
Yeah.
All right. So clearly grew up near Chicago.
Yeah, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Yeah.
Okay. You wouldn't know this because I don't think we hit this the first time. And it's like coming out of the woodworks a little bit. So I fully acknowledge that. But I'm a DMV kid. So I have been a depressed Redskins / Commanders fan for just 30 years. And so now, I can't not start with the courageous question of the day is, if you went back, I know you're going to totally not answer this the truthful way, maybe, but if you went back and you actually were batting 1,000 and you were leading the Bears, would you take Caleb or would you take Jaden?
Oh, I think I'd take Caleb. You got to bet on the horse that you're with, right? Whoever took you to the dance right now, even though we're not at the big dance. And I'm excited about the new head coach coming in, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think I would probably have said the same thing if I were you, although I'm not. I'll take Jaden. Sounds like a plan. And then I could see why Kentucky shows up. I could see why, as a guy that lives in Nashville, the Pret Shop. I've been fairly loyal to the DMV area, with the exception of out here, I'm a Padres fan as I'm rocking the Pods hat, but no Vanderbilt in there. You're not rooting for Vanderbilt basketball?
No, I am. It's a tough one. I went to Kentucky. I got my doctorate at Kentucky, so I kind of feel this allegiance to them. And it is interesting. When Vanderbilt's not playing Kentucky, I root Vanderbilt all day long. And they're actually pretty good this year. And they've had some pretty good wins this year, both on the football field too, right? They beat Alabama. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, when they go head to head, it's a little bit tougher sometimes to kind of go, who am I pulling for? But usually it's Kentucky, to be honest with you.
I wouldn't say Vanderbilt is disrupting everything, but they've certainly are disrupting. Like, you're right, like football and basketball. This isn't just a place.
Baseball, a strong suit for them for a while. Coach Corbin's pretty amazing coach, and then the athletic director there, Candace Lee. I think she's doing a really stand up job.
So, talk me through how a former Army infantry officer ends up batting 750.
It's funny. I had, there's certain things in your life you just don't talk that much about because it's like, I don't know, it just feels insecure, or maybe you feel like judged a certain way because of this. But then over time, you just don't really give a crap as much. You just kind of talk about these things. So it wasn't until just a few years ago that I really just took on the reality of, okay, so I grew up in Chicago on the South Side, about 138th and South State Street. Went to junior college first, just because I didn't know what else you do next in life. I quickly failed out of junior college and joined the military so I could regroup. The military was just a good place for me at that point in time. They said, turn left, you turn left. They said, turn right, you turn right. And if you do those things, you're really good at this. I'm like, okay. So I just kind of stuck with that for a while. And that got me back on the track. I went back to college, and then I went full time in the Army for a while. Basically my 20s were in the Army. And then I came out of that and I went into consulting, which is kind of a weird pivot. I went to KPMG consulting right away. And so I kind of spent between 30 and 45 in the consulting world. Owned a business for about 12 years and sold that back when I turned, I guess, around 40. We sold that business, early 40s. Then I came to academia. So it's kind of one of those things like the military. Once I got into that groove, I was like, okay, I actually kind of got something going on here. I could do this pretty well. And went to Ranger School and Infantry School and Airborne School and all that stuff. And then I came out after I did a company command, and I was like, well, I can use the GI Bill and go back to school. So I just kind of kept going. And that's just what happened to me. And then Vanderbilt, after I sold the business, I decided I want to go into teaching for a while. And it felt like Vanderbilt would be a good place to go to. It's a good school. And I just kind of worked my way in. I'm pretty good at just working my way into things.
Do you think that, I'm looking at these books behind you, and, as you think about these different chapters that you've had in your life, but I think a lot of people, they compartmentalize the chapters. They're like, well, that chapter, I was in the military, and now I've closed that chapter, and now I've utilized that chapter, and but really, at what point, if at all, did you start to realize that, wait a minute, there's lessons that I should not have closed that chapter? There's lessons from that life as a company commander that needs to be applied in this environment. That's not just a chapter 4 thing. This needs to come forward in chapter 5, chapter 6. Is that ring true?
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think for me, it was probably when I closed the quote unquote chapter. I looked at it as projects. I have these 10-year projects in my life, but the chapter in the military, when I first closed that, I kind of felt like I was really closing that chapter and moving on. It was a chance to redefine myself, and I was a little bit hesitant. No offense to anybody who spent 20 or 30 years in the military, but for me personally, after 10 years, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to spend 20. I don't know if I want that to be a defining thing for who I am my entire life, although it's an important part of it. And I think I kind of closed that chapter initially, maybe a little prematurely to your point, where I thought it was okay, I just leave that behind and move on. But then I started to realize that, things I learned there were valuable. They were helpful. There were some paradigms that people had about people in the military, and maybe I kind of redefined them a little bit in their minds. You can only lead if it's this hierarchical structure, that type of thing. So I learned some things from it and brought it forward. And then, after that, it's kind of it's like you're playing a video game and you're just picking up tokens along the way. And each of them can be really helpful in different situations. And there's sometimes now I've been out of the Army for, over 25 years. And there's still some things where I'll refer to that. I wrote about it in books, or I'll just talk about it, or it resonates with the group. And I think for me, it makes you a little bit of you're still true to who you are, but you can be a bit of a chameleon. So when you're talking to people, you can like draw from these different aspects of your life. So it's helpful in conversation. It's helpful in dealing with, challenges or tough times. It's helpful in just kind of grounding yourself in like, hey, I can get stuff done because I did get these other things done. Because, sometimes I know it's a courageous podcast, but part of courage sometimes comes with that little bit of fear, anxiety, questioning, how's this going to work out type of thing. Doesn't mean you don't take a bold step. It's just you're kind of like questioning a little bit. And the ability to like look back at the resume. I mean, you have seen who you've had on the podcast. You've had people with a lot more sparkling resumes than mine, but you still can look back and you go, if I can jump out of a plane, I can handle this meeting or whatever. There's certain things like that. You can go, I can swing this.
It's so funny. I'm playing around with this concept right now about labels. And I think when you think about labels, usually it gets a bad rap out of the gate, like this, like labeling somebody. And I was laughing like, oh, maybe I'll title it The Labeler, just to label labeling. But like, you have so many labels, right? You've got the military side, you've got the professor side. You're a podcast host, you are an author. Like there's all these things that you do, but also there's different rules that come with the label, right? Like, as a podcast host, my job is very different here than coming on your show. And the roles are different. Like I need to get out of the way so the world can understand all the amazing things that you've been doing. Labeler. So when you think about all those things and it chalks up to like the highest version or the simplest version of defining yourself, do you just kind of like chalk it up to, well, leadership expert, or do you want to be known as the label of disruptor? Like is there one that's you feel?
That's a fair question. I think it's like a level above leadership, to be honest with you, because disruptor would kind of fall under the bucket too. And I did some of that work a while back. I was like, what's my purpose? What am I trying to achieve here? And I ultimately landed on, I don't say this articulately as I probably should, but the idea is like, I try to provide people ideas and insights to help them live out their own great purpose. And for me, that's like, okay, then I can think about it that way. And it's like, I can provide ideas or insights about leadership, maybe some from my own experience, but also from studying others. And I can do it about disruption. I can do it about a couple other topics as well. I don't claim to like know everything about everything because I don't. I'm not a massive generalist, but I kind of know certain things. That's the hope. Like I hope that when I spend some time with folks, they'll go, hey, that was time well spent. And he gave me some thoughts that I can use on my own journey.
I really like that. It's also human. It's like, you're not getting compartmentalized in a little box. And a lot of the things that we do, it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, hey, you've got this perspective to bring to the table, which takes listening. It takes, the ability to process all that good stuff. Is there like an ideal assignment for you?
Yeah, I think I tend to think that I work best with teams and organizations. Or team leaders and organizations. So I'm kind of, but that doesn't necessarily mean like team doesn't necessarily mean like first level leader and their team, running the coffee shop. It also could be the executive team, but just understanding team dynamics and how as a leader and a team member, you can contribute well toward an important purpose. That's probably where I spend a lot of my time. I think I get in a pretty good groove if I'm with a group of leaders, kind of helping them through something. So there are certain things I go, no, that's not me. I mean, I taught strategy at the university, but I'm really not a strategist in regard. I think to some degree, to be a strategist, you need to know strategy, but you also need to know some degree of industry knowledge to help people define good strategies. And I'm not, an industry expert, say in consumer packaged goods or something like that. But I do think I'm a bit of a behavioralist in regards to helping leaders and individuals kind of change their behavior by shifting mindset around it. So, you mentioned the red book back there, Disruption, and we can talk a bit more about that if you want to. This kind of interesting story, but I'm not. When somebody says like, "Oh, you work in disruption," well, I'm not a futurist. I'm not going to tell you, what the next tech thing is around the corner, how AI is going to change everything. I am going to tell you something tech's going to change and AI is going to change the way you live your life in certain ways, probably. But I also can tell you a lot of generic things about change that are going to come. But what I can tell you is that when these disruptions come, and they're going to come, here's how you can start to think differently and behave differently in those moments. And that's where I spend a lot of my time.
I just kind of want to, we're definitely going to get into the book here, but like in the spirit of, what's disrupted you? You're a grandfather. No?
I am. Yeah. I got a second one coming soon. By the time this thing airs, I'll have a second grandchild. Yeah.
All right. And let me be very clear to the audience. This is Patrick's he's a young dude. Okay. Like, so I don't want to like, for those who've got us between their ears, has it disrupted you? And how old are the kids and how many kids?
Yeah. So I have two kids. My wife and I have been married for 34 years this summer. So we were college sweethearts. She met me after dropping out of junior college and getting my act together a little bit, should say. So we've been married 34 years. We have a 32-year-old, a 27-year-old. They're both married. And our granddaughter is 2. And the other one is due, the girl, she's due like within the next week. So
Wow.
yeah. And we're very fortunate. They live very close to us, which is nice.
I mean, silly question. Cause I think just when you think of all the things you've done or, experimented, when you describe yourself in traits, like if I did the old 3 words to describe Patrick Leddin, like is curiosity on that list? Like is challenges on that list? Like how do you go about just distilling you down if you had to a few traits?
Yeah, I would think curiosity or some variation is probably on that list. I am a big asking questions type of person, inwardly as well as outwardly. Just trying to like I like to really kind of like think things through, ask questions. I'll ask a stupid question. I don't really, not wrapped around getting labeled, speaking of labeled as the stupid guy, because if I speak long enough, they'll think it anyway. I think there's also something around pragmatism. I'm actually pretty pragmatic in regard to what I think, what might work, or how we can make progress on something. Or it's interesting we're talking about the idea, but at the end of the day, what could we do with this idea? I mean, there's always myself going toward the how do we use this to generate revenue? What are we going to do with this? How does it fix a problem? That type of thing as well. So I enjoy the kind of esoteric discussions, but my mind just kind of goes to application very quickly. And then I guess, I think on the third one, there's probably a bit of, I don't know the right way to phrase it, but basically somebody who's pretty darn comfortable with ambiguity, like not knowing something. I'm okay with that. And I can still sleep at night and get up the next day and figure it out. I'm not freaked out by it.
I like that. I like all 3. So curiosity, pragmatic, and ambiguity. But when I think about your background, like, that kind of makes sense. You're like,
Yeah.
I sign up for the journey. I don't know how this is going to end. Right. But I'm willing to go. I'm willing to opt in, and you're not going to talk yourself out of that. I mean, I sort of feel like you had talked earlier about these 10-year projects, which is funny that in my business, I use the word missions, but you use projects, which is like, interesting. So not to disrupt everything was a 10-year project, but every book, there is ambiguity. Like you go in with some semblance of a hypothesis, and usually as you storm through it, you're like, oh shoot, I didn't think we were going to get here. Or you're like, wow, we've arrived. When you're cracking this book, what percent was like, it went surprisingly exactly where I thought it would go versus, actually 50% of it I got right. And 50% of it was like, buckle up.
Yeah, I love that question. I think that there was a sizable part of me that didn't know exactly where it was going to go. And the reason behind that is, so the book, I co-authored the book with James Patterson. And James Patterson, for folks who may not know him, Google him or walk in a bookstore or something. I mean, you look him up and he's everywhere. He's literally the world's best-selling author. There's only a couple authors in time who've made more than $1 billion writing books. It's him and J.K. Rowling, right? It's insane. So where it came, this was like a shoot your shot type of opportunity for me.
We also have to have that chat in a minute, by the way, how that partnership came together, but you carry on.
Yeah. So as far as like, did I know exactly what it was going to look like as we were laying it out? In some ways, yes, because in some ways I look back at what the finished product is, and then you go back and look at your original notes that you were working on. You're like, hey, this isn't as far off as I thought it would be. It was the journey, and then the details. Like if I was to say, oh, originally I kind of had the table of contents in my mind, that's ended up being what the table of contents was. But it's the white space between those words in the table of contents where some of the insights came in that you go, okay, I didn't see that one coming, or that's a twist on it, or I didn't think about that deep enough yet. Like I was kind of on the near side of complexity, and I hadn't really thought through that thing completely to get to the simple nugget on the other side. And by doing that, so it was like directionally accurate, but it wasn't as refined or as well thought out.
And then how did the partnership come to be?
I think that honestly, the words we were just talking about ambiguity and curiosity, and I think these play into it because so I was teaching at Vanderbilt. I started there about 12 years ago, business professor teaching undergrad. So I was teaching classes like corporate strategy, occasionally teach marketing, taught a lot of negotiation content. So there's a lot around communicating in business environment. And when COVID hit, the university sent out a notification to everybody or a request. They said, hey, we don't typically teach classes online at Vanderbilt. That's just not what we do. But we obviously know with COVID, things are changing. If you're a professor who's interested or willing to write a new course that can teach 100 students online, let us know. So I look at that, right, and I'm like, okay, that's opportunity. Let's write the course we want to write, type of thing. So I said I want to write a course called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. They approved it in the first few semesters. We were kind of working through COVID. I got the course out and started teaching it. Well, coincidentally, at the same time or so, there's a former Vanderbilt. He's an alum from Vanderbilt. Graduated back in like late '60s. Ended up becoming the CEO of Sotheby's, like the auction house, and big company. Well, he happened to be retired, and he guest spoke at a class at Brown University, and that class had a similar kind of title to it around leading through difficult times. But it was very guest speaker centric. So they bring in a lot of leaders who led in business, and they tell their story and kind of interact with the students. So he had come to this class. He had come to the university. His name's Michael Ainsley. He came to the university and he said, hey, I want to teach a class at Vanderbilt like the one I got to guest speak at Brown. And the chancellor of our university said, all right, that sounds interesting. Let's do it. And then, that Plinko game on Price is Right, where they drop something in, it goes tick, 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 tick. For the audience, it kind of goes from top to bottom and settles in a spot. Well, I was the spot. Because when it plinkoed from the chancellor all the way down to who's a professor who could do this and kind of do this with this gentleman, it landed in my world because I had a class that had a similar title. And basically my job in this one section was to create a class where we could bring in guest speakers, but it still had the rigor of a university, class and all that type of stuff. So we created this class that was like a kind of a dream opportunity. So we'd bring in these different guest speakers, and we have like Doug Parker, who was the CEO of American Airlines, along with the lady who's the president of Flight Attendants Association, Sarah Nelson. And they'd come in the classroom together and talk about how they dealt with COVID, right? Which is like a really interesting thing. So we had one after another after another. Well, one of the people on the list for the first semester was James Patterson, because he went to Vanderbilt a number of years ago. He's an alum. He got his master's in literature there, English literature there. So I get the list of all the guests for the semester that Michael and I had put together, predominantly Michael. And my job was to call each of them up ahead of time and basically talk them through about the class. Like, how can I support them? I'll be in the class with the students. What do you want me to do? Do you want to write a case for this class? And I run it like a case, and then you can sit there and give kind of the expert answers or what really happened. Do you want me to just interview you? Do you want me to sit down and shut up because you got it? I mean, what do you want me to do? I have no ego here. I just want to make sure it's a great experience for you and the students. So James Patterson was on the list. Patterson's name was on the list. Of course, I know who James Patterson is by name. So I call him up and I say, I'm the professor of this class, and we talk for a few minutes and kind of get him set up. And after the class was over, I said to him, hey, I do this leadership podcast. Would you have any willingness to do a podcast with me? And he said, yeah, I'll do it with you. So I thought that was great. So we did the podcast, and after the podcast was over, he was like, I really enjoyed that. That was a great conversation. I was like, okay, here I come with a bigger ask. So what he had talked about when he came to class that day was he talked about his career and his life. And a lot of people don't know this. You may not know this, but he was at one point, he was the CEO of J. Walter Thompson, the big ad agency. He wrote, in his 30s, in his 30s, he was the youngest creative director there. He's got a really interesting career as a CEO in a large ad agency. He penned the line, I'm a Toys R Us kid. I mean, he was very much, very creative in that space, but he had this desire to write. So he decided to give up that job as CEO, which is a, sizable income back in the late 80s, 90s timeframe, to go pursue the writing thing. So I thought that was really interesting. And I wanted to, so I approached him and said, let's write a book together about doing this, about disrupting, how you disrupt yourself. He gave me the chance to do that. So I wrote the first outline. He called me up and just told me how much he hated it. Well, the funny thing was, I remember reading somewhere as I was studying it that he had written that his first outline for his first book was like 300 pages. And at that point, he's like, I got the book type of thing. So I'm thinking, this guy wants a long outline. So I write, I'm guessing at what I think he wants. That's a problem when you guess at something. But I guess, and I write a 37-page outline, and he calls me up on a Thursday. He basically just tells me how much he dislikes it and that, I need to rework on this thing. And I said, I said, should I rework on it? He goes, you just throw that out and start again. And then he ends with, I got to go. I got to call Bill Clinton. Click. And I was like, okay. So then right before he hung up, he said, you can get me something in 2 weeks or 2 months. So I was like, okay, I've already messed up the first time. I'm going to messed up, he's still talking to me. So next 2 weeks, I didn't do anything but like stare at my shoes and think about how do I write about a book about disruption? Because he said, make it feel different than any other book on disruption or any other business book. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? Is it choose your adventure? Is it written front to back? Is it circular on the page? What does that even mean? So I thought about it for a while, and I wrote this book, this outline that was an outline that basically said, you have no hope, you're doomed. I mean, that's basically what the outline was. It was like, and I tried to write this fictional piece to the introduction piece to it. And I sent it to him. He called me up and he basically was like, not only do people not want to hear your story, but that's terrible writing. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I had 2 strikes with them, and luckily I got a third chance, and I just decided to go back and regroup. And I threw away everything I'd been working on that summer, trying to guess at what he wanted. And I said, what would I write if I want to write this thing? What would it look like? And I think that's a lesson. It's so obvious, it's hard to say it because people are like, well, yeah, dummy, why didn't you do that in the first place? Okay, well, put yourself in my shoes. You probably guess what he's trying to get to. But so I had to learn the lesson. So I then spent about 8 months on the line, really working on the outline for this thing. And I sent it to him, and he said, okay, now this one makes sense. And then that got us going into the conversation because we decided that a lot of the book would be basically about like life is full of disruptions, and they can be very unique to you or very ubiquitous. So, your doctor gives you a blood work that didn't come out too well. That might be unique to you. It obviously impacts other people in your life, but it's unique to you. Or COVID-19 is ubiquitous. And it can be really small, like just a passing comment someone says in the hall that makes you stop and like, whoa, I didn't think about it that way. It can be a disruptive moment, or it can be something really, really large and significant. But the idea is they're going to come at you. And the question is, what do you do in those moments of disruption? Do you use them as an opportunity to actually move closer to your purpose in your life, get back on the path in life? Or do you use them to get off the path or maybe to redefine the path? So that's what we started going into. We decided to interview about 350 people, which took us quite a while to do 350 interviews. But they were people who are household names, people like, like actors and people like that. Yeah, you.
When you say we, like, how does that, was it split? Was the interview process split?
It was split to a certain degree. So he did some of the interviews with me. I also put together a team to help me work through this. So they would help me. I sat through all the interviews. He sat through some team members sat through them. They helped me code them and kind of call out the unique aspects of them. But Patterson was very hands-on. I mean, I found as many books as he puts out, because he puts out about 11 books a year. So he's pretty disruptive, but he's never written in this space really. As much as you would think, oh, he's like pretty hands-off. Now he's really hands-on. My phone will ring 2 or 3 times a day from him in really good ways nowadays.
All right. So
we kind of worked our way through it.
There's so much. Like, first of all, what a ride. And I know the book hasn't even launched yet, but like, there's a few things that I just kind of want to make sure I'm tracking on and the audience takes away. I mean, first of all, one of my favorite guests, and him, Seth Godin, talks about create the conditions. And it's so cool, Pat, that like you put yourself in a position where, like, what I thought about you as a professor, what I love most about it is that it's like, you never know. Like, it's the next generation. Like, I never want to get too far away from the action. Like, I used to call it with my old partners, and this isn't to vilify them, but like, dude, ivory tower syndrome is real. Like, the minute you're that far away from the work, you're in trouble. You got to stay close. So you create the conditions of being close to what people that have disposable time, maybe not disposable income, but they've got disposable time to play and fiddle with what's coming next. But then suddenly the Plinko board lands here, and it's like, I have to call these 50 names of people I know. And next thing, you're creating conditions in the CEO of American, or the Patterson thing. And just the fact that you called him Jim. Okay. They're like, did you find, when did he go from James Patterson to you're in flow and he's just Jim? Like, how long did it take you to get there?
Probably about 2.5 years. Somewhere around 2 years. We're really gotten that flow. Really gotten that flow. We were like breaking bread together, sitting down, talking through it and working through it. Yeah, it took time. Part of it is You know, you go too fast on certain situations like that. You kind of ruin the relationship too early on. You're too eager. I think you have to, for me personally, and it wasn't something he demanded from me, but I think that he probably evaluated it in me, is he had to see that you're like a workhorse, that you're going to figure this thing out and you're not going to bother him until it's the appropriate time to engage in him. So I would work on something and know I was in pretty good stead with him, and then basically go back and work on it for a while to come back and talk to him more about it. And that was probably, I would say it was definitely a year and a half before I felt like, okay, this thing's gonna work. You know what I mean? It was a year and a half but I always looked at it as like, I'm in the game, because there was a point where initially it was like, yeah, like there was a point in the conversation where he said, you know, sometimes you want to do something with somebody and it just doesn't seem like you're going to work out. Right. And at that moment, I was kind of like, oh, well, I got a good TEDx opening. So then I was like, okay. So I just kind of kept talking. And then he said, well, you know, maybe if you write it, maybe I'll do a blurb on it for you. I was like, hey, I got an endorsement from James Patterson on a book. Who wouldn't take that? Right. That sounds good. And then he's like, well, maybe I'll put my name on it, and just he wasn't toying with me. He was just thinking it through. And I was like, anything I get out of this is further along. And I'm learning a ton just from being close to this guy about writing. And, you know, I've written some things. I've written a couple other books before these ones from my shoulder. And, you know, there's a lot you learn on your own. But boy, when you're sitting like, I don't say at the feet, but side by side with somebody like that, you learn a ton about the process.
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind immediately. And one, the fact that I didn't know he came from advertising, because that's my background. Like all of my mentors were madmen in New York who I was terrified of, that he probably broke bread with on a regular basis, by the way. But the process that you described for anyone not in advertising, that's what it is. It's like rigorously ripping and ripping and ripping and going back to the well. And like, you have to be, there's a thick skinness to keep going.
Which is tough sometimes, right? Because we all have egos. I mean, if people say, I don't, you know, then you're not caring about the work. You care about it. But at the end of the day, you're just kind of like, I want to get this as right as I can. And that means I know I'm going to have to battle through this and process it. And a lot of people just, I mean, who am I to say a lot? I'm like cast dispersions on folks, but many people aren't willing to make that journey. My wife teaches at Vanderbilt, and the chancellor at Vanderbilt got really behind kind of helping me put this thing together, as far as supporting, as far as putting a student research team together. And he knew about this thing on his radar. And she saw him the other day, and he said to her, he goes, your husband is tenacious. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because, you know, there's different ways you can think about tenacious, like just overtly aggressive or something like that. I'm not that, I don't think. But what I am is like, I am a dog with a bone. When I get something that I like see could possibly happen, I'm going to keep chasing that thing until I'm basically told I can't. And even then, I don't know. I just, that's something that's kind of wired in my head.
Well, I wonder, like, now this is like, let's lay you down on the therapist exterminator, right? Like,
I don't think you want to do that, man. It's only an hour-long podcast.
You know what? This is my way of saying it takes one to know one, like a little bit. Like, you know, I do think we're these little boys and girls trapped in these adult bodies. And I think shit that happened to us as we're going through it, they define us, or they give us, if we so choose to accept, the universe decides to throw us lessons that maybe we didn't pass the first time in our minds. So when you're finally ready for them, right? Like this tenacious muscle, for me, it's got nothing to do with ceilings and everything to do with floors. Like if I think about where I came from and how I use that tenaciousness, as this is the Courageous podcast, those words are, okay, maybe they're cousins, right? They go hand in hand. I have a moment right now. This is why this is deeply resonating with me. So the last few years I've been working with Landon Donovan on his memoir. And, you know, when you're dealing with probably the best men's soccer player we've ever produced in the US, we can go deeper on that. I didn't want to let him down. I never wanted to let him down. But at the same time, I also acknowledged, and I'm sure you feel this way about Patterson, it does raise the bar. It forces you to always be on, and like, there's no anxiety with it. It's just like, you want to honor this opportunity that the universe has thrown your way, and you want to hit the bar or get close. And the fact that Patterson kept coming back to you and saying, reach out when you're ready, reach out when you're ready. Like he wasn't willing to like abandon the project. Has to be like, okay, that's the cue I need to keep going. Isn't that kind of what this whole exercise of life is? And I'm curious in Disrupt Everything, do you talk about cues? Is there anything on cues, on like looking for cues to help you keep going? Did that pop up anywhere in the research?
Yeah, we do talk about, we don't use the word cues, although I love it. We do talk about, so we use a fire analogy through the whole book. So the idea is like you have a fire inside yourself, and disruptions are the opportunity to throw fuel on that fire, even though disruptions you do not want. And there's the disruptions like, oh wow, this new job opportunity is disruptive for my family, but it's a great opportunity. It could be really exciting, but that's still disruptive. But there could be also disruptions that are like, I did not expect that diagnosis. I did not, lots of things that nobody wants to have necessarily haunt them or show up at their door. But the idea is that, through all of these, you're going to see, I guess I would say, some cues along the way that we talk to. And specifically when you start trying to create a more disruptive team or organization, you start to see some signals from people that they're getting on board with it. So questions like, how do you fan the flames of that disruption? There's also some cues when they're resisting a bit, because we would say that there's the difference oftentimes in our minds, at least when we wrote, is like between change and disruption. Is disruption is a change, but sometimes change can come at you over time. Disruption happens to come a little bit more quickly. So you'll see some cues though about resistance, and as well as seeing some people like coming on board. But one of the things we thought was really critical is like it's not like a Pavlovian thing, right? This disruption happens and then boom, my reaction is just like ingrained in me. What it is that the first piece is really around discernment, which I guess would be also kind of cue oriented, in that you're like looking at a given disruption and thinking to yourself, okay, what signals am I getting out there in regard to what I feel like I should do in the face of this disruption? And sometimes you might say, I feel like I need to move toward the change where this thing is going. And sometimes you might say, I feel like I need to move more towards stability. And actually, when everybody's moving one way, the most disruptive thing I can do is actually be counter to that. And then the other question, that kind of like the typical 2x2, is, so one is change and stability, and the other axis is individual versus collective. And the idea of like, should I be moving out on my own or should I be moving out with others? So we use 5 different roles that you can think about, all using the fire analogy. So there's like trailblazer, torchbearer, fire chief, firefighter, and tinder gatherer. But the idea is in each of those is kind of to discern which role you feel like you need to be in that moment, and recognize a couple things. One is you might have a personal feeling of where you want to be in that moment based on the disruption, but then you also need to bounce that off the context of the situation. So if I was to get that call and say, hey, Patrick, we haven't talked in years, but I got this great job opportunity. You can pick up and move your family to, you name it, part of the world. And it sounds really exciting. And the pay sounds great. And the title sounds great. And the company sounds great. I might be like, I'm going to be a torchbearer and go, or I'm going to be a trailblazer and just go tackle that thing. But then contextually, I might come home, my family might be like, yeah, the kids are in middle school and they've got friends. So you got to kind of balance that type of thing out, but just helping people think through what roles they're going to take on before they even get into what they're actually going to do.
I've been struggling with, when you speak fluent metaphor, I guess, which is kind of what we do, right? Like I had a client who I could sense was a firefighter. I described them as a firefighter. And to be honest, it's good to be able to solve problems when fires happen, but I had struggled to figure out a way to help them be like, oh, you're reacting to the fire. Like you're waiting for the call and now you're a firefighter. And it's good that you have the skill to put that out. But when we talk about change at Courageous, we're like, nobody asked you, no, you didn't get a vote on change, right? Let's agree. Right. So even change is driving you or you're driving change. And when change drives you, I think that's the resilience muscle that's being built, how you respond to that. But when you hit the gas and you're driving change, that is the courage muscle. They're good muscle. They're both good to have. And so when change drives me, I think that's the firefighter. And you kind of help me work through something. And I don't love the term, but I want to run it by you. Like, I think arsonist in the society right now is not a great word. Can we agree? But in some ways, how do we delicately light that fire and be an art? Like, is there a way to turn arsonist? This is like 2 branding guys walking to a bar a little bit. Like, because I think like I want to stoke fire in somebody else. Like that's the whole point of this podcast. Just like you do, like you're providing insight and perspective and ideas. In some ways, you're an intentional but thoughtful arsonist. to stoke a fire in somebody that they might not even know they have. But that term is so negative.
Yeah.
When you think about your 5, what term do you use that's not arson?
As you might imagine, we played with so many different words around this, and we tried to lean into the ones that didn't have too much of a negative connotation to them, right? So arsonist was on this table at one point. The problem with arsonist is that, from our perspective, at least as we were looking at it, was, we were trying to say, like, how do you write a book about disruption and not get into a lot of value judgments? Because there's people that we interviewed, there's people that are in the book that, their journeys are different than mine, and some of them made decisions different than I would have made in the moment. And some of those I could even maybe go like, I don't even know if I like that choice they made. But the difference between being what we would call a positive disruptor and a negative disruptor is the difference between what's the source of the choices they made. So we all know somebody that's a disruptor, that's the curmudgeon, or you've worked around them before. They're difficult. They come to the meeting and they just blow it up, and they just do it for the hell of blowing it up, right? And you could be like, oh, that person's really disruptive. Well, they are, but that's not what we're encouraging you to be. Because that person, the source of that disruptive activity is not a positive source. I think most would agree. So the question becomes, what's the source of it? So yeah, there's certainly times where it's like, we need to light a fire here. And there's stories in the book. You mentioned soccer. John Ingram is the owner of the Nashville, or part owner, I think, of the Nashville Soccer Club here in town. And there's a story in there about him where he was at a convention years ago, and he came down an escalator and saw a change in technology and decided we need to embrace that. So the disruptive moment for him was just seeing a new advance in technology and then going back to his organization saying, we need to embrace this. I'm sure there were some people going, this dude's being an arsonist, right? So, but the intent behind it was pure, if you will. And the long-term effects, when you look back at, through the rearview mirror at it, it's like, holy cow, if they hadn't done that, they probably wouldn't have their business. So it gets really decked down to intentions. And I think intention is really important. We talk about myself and Jim building a relationship over time. I think that in both situations, our intent was like, great, I'm not just trying to ride somebody's coattails to produce something, and I know that he'll help me sell through a lot. And at the same time, I don't think he was like, yeah, I'll just kind of, my intent is just kind of make this guy's life difficult for a couple of years or something like that. It was a matter of like, hey, our intent is to figure out how do we create a product that'll be really useful to folks. And the creative process to do that, as you know, Ryan, can be difficult.
And look, we are proud torchbearers here I think we're aligned on, like, again, disruption is going to happen. So let's say we got in our time machine here, right? Because the book isn't even out yet until September. So we got 100 days or so. So let's say we went 3 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Obviously, you and Jim are working on the next book. No, you're working on another book, but where do you see your energy going? Are you thinking happiness is, and again, it's a blend, and you've got grandkids, but like, what percent is you want to consult? What percent is you want to write? What percent is keynote stages? What percent is podcasts?
I think that's a fair question. I mean, I think that writing will probably be the journey that's probably the underpinning of everything I do. But they're also reinforcing, right? So if you go out and keynote and consult, that informs your writing. And if you do those things, and there's a lot of starving people writing, and they may never get people to see their stuff. So I think that there's a desire for me to find some degree of balance where I see myself as writer first, but that doesn't mean that I'm always putting the most amount of time into that. It just means that every day I'm getting up and writing something. And then I think that, keynoting and podcasting are a way to get the ideas out into the world and get feedback on the ideas. As we were writing this particular book, I think I keynoted to, at time I stopped counting, but about 12,000 people in audiences just to get their feedback on content. So I would test the content and test the behaviors that we were talking about and see how they resonated with the audience and which ones came up and got questions, directed toward me afterward. And that was really, Jim and I found that really informative because we talk in the book about like disrupting yourself, disrupting your relationships, disrupting your family, your team, your organization, your industry. And the family one, the specific story I told around disrupting family, time after time would just resonate with people, whether they're CEOs or frontline leaders, because they would leave going, this is all interesting. Hopefully that's what they thought, but this is interesting, but I need to talk to my sister today. That type of thing. So I think you just get, I think if I just sat and wrote it in isolation, although there might be a degree of me like, wow, that's personally fulfilling to do that because I enjoy doing it. There's a part of me that says, yeah, you do that and your impact is going to be not nearly as big as it could be. And your bank account might not be either. Might be either. So you need to get out there and do things. Fortunately for me, I enjoy doing that too. So I didn't really answer your question other than say I'm going to be a writer first and then everything else will build off it.
I mean, sounds like a prioritized, writer. And then what does it take to be a better writer or bring insights to the market? Like super clear from where I'm sitting. I'm curious as we wrap, there's a famous proverb that fear and courage are kin. When you're going through life just like the rest of us, and maybe you're in the metaphorical helicopter jumping out of onto the mountain here, and you've done that already, to be fair. So, but like, do you still feel fear from time to time? Do you still feel like, oh, what am I doing? Do you laugh at it? Do you have fear? And then if you do, how do you go about managing it?
Yeah, I mean, do I have fear? Yeah, I'm not fearless. Do I have fear? I think that what I have maybe sometimes is a little bit of anxiety, or how's this exactly going to play out, or what exactly is going to happen here. So I got booked. So when Jim and I launched the book in the fall, one of the stages we just got put on, it's like I'm between. You mentioned Seth Godin's on the stage, James Clear's on the stage that day, Brené Brown's on the stage. It's like a whole bunch of people and me, and it's kind of like am I going to be wearing, am I going to be wearing a path in the back, before I step on stage? Probably. But there's also, I have a serious game on switch in my head, and I don't know where it came from. I'm thankful it's there. But like in the Army, for example. So I was a jump master in the Army, which meant that, not only do you jump out of the planes, but you are the ones in charge of putting people out of planes. And when you first do it, you're like, gosh, one thing you're supposed to do is like, hang out the open door to see if the planes behind you are too low. And if they're too low, you need to get them to move up so your jumpers don't land, and you never have hung out the door of an airplane before like that. You just typically fall out the door you're jumping, but to hang out the door and pull yourself back in is kind of like, well, can I do that? And then you do it and you go, okay, that's doable. So there's a part of me that's just like, you know what? It's game on. I am going to make the very most of this experience I possibly can, with the hopes that I'll put a lot of good out into the world. And Jim Patterson said to me, and I wrote about this the other day, he said to me, are you going to spend your life, drinking from the cup of grief or the cup of joy? And he said, the joy tastes a lot better. So just grab the joy cup and go for it. And that's how I look at it. It's like, this is going to be, yeah, am I nervous about the ride? Probably, but man, it's going to be a cool ride. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but to do these things and get this opportunity, why would I not, go at it as best I can?
Where can we get Disrupt Everything? Where can I pre-order it?
Well, there's two places you can pre-order it everywhere. So, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, any of those places you can order it. And if people are listening and they have an event going on this year between now and September, we actually have copies of the book that are event only copies. So if you're like, hey, I want to do something cool, James Patterson book, 6 months before it shows up in the stores, I can give it to my participants. We've got a deal where you can have me come in and speak and get copies of the books for folks ahead of time, which is kind of fun. If you just go to my website, patrickleddin.com, you can find that info.
Patrick, what a fun convo. I mean, it's such a fun convo. I'm glad we didn't lie you down on the couch too bad. I really don't think we did.
Well, let me tell you, man, youngest of 5, growing up in an Irish Catholic home. I was raised with lots of guilt and lots of, you better figure out how to, survive the dinner table. And that's just the way it is.
Again, you're very easy to root for. Like, you're like, it's cool to hear your journey and to know that you're just in it now. And I guess maybe this is the last question. Then yeah. Are you a spiritual guy? Like, when you look at all this, are you like?
Yeah, I'm Christian. Yeah, I'm Christian. And my faith's important to me.
Are you like, universe, why this challenge? Universe, why this challenge?
Yeah. Why this challenge? I don't know. I don't know the answer to the why. I just know that there's with opportunity comes responsibility. And, I'm going to figure out how to be a good example to folks and try to do the right thing in life and have it. It's funny when this opportunity really started to come up, I hit a point where I said, if I'm really going to go after this opportunity, last year, I said, I need to leave the university, which is like, how many people stand in line people behind me would be happy to get my professorship at Vanderbilt? A lot. but I left. And after 11 years, and I'm like, you know what? You can't not be willing to take a chance. And, like you're just talking about, our faith, if God put this in front of me, I got to be willing to do what I can to make the best of it. Because ultimately, I really do believe, Ryan, that it's like, yeah, it'll be cool for me to get to stand on stages or do these things or, entertain and educate people or whatever. At the end of the day, I really do believe that the content in this book will help people live better lives. And that's what the challenge ultimately is. I think all of us can look and say, you know what? I got relationships with some folks that need to be disrupted. They're good, but they're not that great. There's conversations that maybe I haven't been serving it very well or taking care of it. And I need to have that conversation. Or maybe if you feel like, we sit around the dinner table, if you even have one of those as a family, and we don't even know where the heck we're kind of going collectively, we're going to talk to you about disrupting it. And we're going to talk to you about if your team is just not being particularly effective. Maybe you do need to be that, using your word, arsonist, and getting this thing moving forward. So it's not just a matter of like waiting for the ball to come to you and figure out what you're going to do. It's a matter of like, hey, look around, do an assessment. Are your relationships as strong as they should be? Or do you feel like they could be? Or maybe you're underserving them. This is a chance to right that ship. And it also is, the reality is the chance to say to some relationships, this one needs to end. Because we talk there's 4 facts we talk about in the book just very quickly. One is the status quo is a deceptive little devil. Is the idea of this disruptions are going to keep coming at you. The second one is you're actually wired to disrupt. You have a prefrontal cortex. You can think of cool stuff. You've got a history. You've got resources. You can do things. The third one is the idea that relationships in life, which we all live in a sea of relationships, but relationships provide both headwinds and tailwinds. And you need to be honest about where each relationship stands. And then the fourth one is that you only go around once. So make it matter, make it count.
Beautiful.
So those are the kind of 4 fundamental things to it. So I kind of feel like, how can I go out and tell people to do these things if I'm not willing to give it a shot myself?
Those are beautiful. And also, I know it's not about you. It's like, if you can, you're just like the vessel to share all of this stuff. And selfishly, I really love that we did not start there. I always this is like a little sneak peek for those who listen. If someone made it to the 62nd minute of a podcast, they're clearly invested in this conversation. So it's like a little gem. It's like a little gem that I like. And those 4 are so good. And the relationships of headwinds and tailwinds, you don't have time, I'm sorry, to win over everybody or even attempt to win over everybody. I'm so grateful that we've stayed in touch over the years. You definitely are, on the headwinds side for me. When you have an event in San Diego, please reach out and let me know. And let's break bread, stay in touch. PatrickLeddin.com, everybody. And let's go. Let's see where this thing goes. I'm very excited.
Yep, let's go do it, man. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.